On October 2, 1969, a group of South Vietnamese soldiers were cut off, surrounded, and running out of time in the Mekong Delta. They had no ammunition left. They had abandoned their weapons because they were useless. They couldn't call for help because their radios were dead. They were going to die in that field. 6 times a helicopter tried to reach them. 6 times enemy fire drove it back. On the 7th attempt, the pilot didn't turn away. He flew lower. He circled the battlefield under continuous machine gun fire until the men on the ground understood what he was doing. He was showing them where to go. Then he landed. And he did it 14 more times. His name was Michael Novosel. He was 47 years old. He had already fought in 1 war. He came back specifically to fly into situations like this one. Everything you are about to hear comes from official military records, the Medal of Honor citation, verified historical accounts, and Novosel's own documented testimony. No embellishment, just what actually happened. Michael Joseph Novosel was born on September 3, 1922 in Etna, Pennsylvania. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps in February 1941. He wanted to be a pilot. There was one problem. The aviation cadet program required a minimum height of 5 feet 4 inches. Novosel was a 1/4 inch short. The Army assigned him to a pay clerk's job. He refused to accept that. According to his own memoir, he found a way around the height requirement and entered flight training. He earned his wings and his commission in 1942. He was 20 years old. He expected to go to war immediately. Instead, the Army made him a flight instructor. He trained other pilots at Laredo Army Airfield in Texas. He raised, by his own account, a considerable fuss about it. He was told that only the best students became instructors. He looked at his orders and noticed that all the best students had names beginning with N. He trained pilots until December 1944, when he transitioned to the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. In July 1945, Novosel arrived on Tinian Island in the Pacific. He flew 4 combat missions with the 58th Bombardment Wing. When Japan surrendered aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, Novosel was one of nearly 500 B-29 pilots who flew over the ceremony. In the days that followed, he flew supply drops to Allied prisoners of war held in Japan. He stayed in the military after the war. He commanded the 99th Bombardment Squadron until its deactivation in 1947. He became a B-29 test pilot at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. In 1949, he left active duty and joined the Air Force Reserve. He went to work as a commercial airline pilot. He had a career, a family, a life outside the military. But the war in Vietnam was escalating, and Michael Novosel wasn't done. When Vietnam heated up, Novosel wanted a combat assignment. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve. He was 41 years old. The Air Force told him he was too old. There were too many lieutenant colonels, no room for him. He could have accepted that. He didn't. He found an Army program that accepted experienced pilots from other branches. He gave up his rank of lieutenant colonel. He started over as a chief warrant officer. He learned to fly helicopters. By January 1966, he was in Vietnam flying medevac missions, what the pilots called Dustoff, unarmed helicopters, into active firefights, to pull out the wounded. He flew his first tour and came home. Then he went back for a second tour beginning in March 1969. He didn't have to go back. He chose to. By 1969, the Dustoff program had become one of the most dangerous assignments in Vietnam. Approximately 3,000 pilots and crewmen flew unarmed air ambulances throughout the war. 33% became casualties themselves. They flew without weapons, without gunship escorts, into landing zones still under active fire. The doctrine was straightforward. If there are wounded men who cannot be reached any other way, you go get them. The Mekong Delta region near the Cambodian border was among the most heavily contested operating areas in Vietnam. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces used the dense river delta terrain and proximity to Cambodia as cover and staging grounds. On October 2, 1969, a large enemy force had pinned down a group of South Vietnamese Army soldiers in Quien Tuong province. The soldiers had been in contact with the enemy since 6 o'clock that morning. By the time Novosel received the call, they had been fighting for hours. They were out of ammunition. Their weapons were useless. Their radios were dead. They had no way to communicate with anyone trying to reach them. And Novosel couldn't speak Vietnamese. Novosel launched his UH-1 Huey toward Kien Tuong province. He had no air cover, no gunship escort, no fire support. When he reached the battle area, enemy fire was so intense it forced him away. He circled. He came back from a different direction, forced away again. 6 times enemy fire drove him back from the battle area. 6 times he circled and came back. On the 7th approach, instead of attempting to land immediately, he did something the official citation describes specifically. He flew at low level under continuous heavy fire in circles around the battlefield. He was using his helicopter as a signal. He was showing the scattered, wounded, unarmed South Vietnamese soldiers where to assemble. He couldn't talk to them, so he showed them. According to the official Medal of Honor citation, this display of courage visibly raised their morale as they recognized it as a signal to assemble for evacuation. Then he landed. He pulled men onto the helicopter while his medic and crew chief worked beside him. He lifted out. He came back. 15 times, Novosel brought his helicopter into that battle area. Each extraction the official citation calls extremely hazardous. Each time, he flew without cover into a fortified enemy position under continuous machine gun fire. Each time, he pulled men aboard and lifted out. On 6 separate occasions during the mission, enemy fire forced him out of the battle area entirely. Each time he circled and returned from a different direction. By the end of the mission, he had been in the air for approximately 2.5 hours over that single battle area alone. His total flight time that day reached 11 hours. On the 15th and final extraction, Novosel spotted a wounded soldier lying close to an enemy bunker. He knew exactly what approaching that bunker meant. According to his Medal of Honor citation, he hovered the helicopter backward toward the soldier. As the man was pulled aboard, enemy automatic weapons opened fire at close range. The aircraft was hit. Novosel was wounded by shrapnel and plexiglass. He momentarily lost control of the helicopter. He recovered. He flew to safety. In total, 15 extractions, 29 men saved. There is a detail in Novosel's story that the numbers alone cannot capture. During his second tour in Vietnam, a new pilot arrived requesting assignment to the 82nd Medical Detachment. It was Warrant Officer Michael J. Novosel, Jr. His son. A month before the father was scheduled to return home, Novosel Jr.'s helicopter came under fire and made an emergency landing. Novosel Sr., with wounded already aboard his own helicopter, descended and picked up his son and the grounded crew. 1 week later, Novosel Sr. and his helicopter were shot down. He looked up at the pilot coming to rescue him. It was his son. According to verified accounts, Novosel Sr. said, "I'll never hear the last of this." Both men flew Dustoff in Vietnam. Both men pulled the other out of a downed aircraft. On June 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon presented Michael Novosel with the Medal of Honor at the White House. Novosel was 48 years old. He was the oldest Army recipient of the Medal of Honor in the Vietnam War. The citation credited his selfless conduct with saving the lives of 29 soldiers on October 2, 1969. What the citation could not fully capture was the scope of what Novosel had done across 2 tours. By the time he finished his service in Vietnam, he had flown 2,543 medevac missions. He had evacuated 5,589 wounded personnel, among them his own son. Novosel stayed in the Army after Vietnam. He served 3 years at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as chief test pilot for the Army's Golden Knights parachute team. He later lectured at the Warrant Officer Career College at Fort Rucker, Alabama. He retired on February 28, 1985. At his retirement ceremony, the Army gave him a rare honor for a living recipient. They renamed the main street at Fort Rucker Novosel Street. He had accumulated 12,400 military flight hours over his career, 2,038 of them in combat. When he retired, he was the last active-duty military aviator on flying status who had flown combat missions in World War II. A career that began in 1941 ended in 1985. 44 years, 3 wars, 1 man. In 1999, he published his memoir, Dustoff, the memoir of an Army aviator. In it, he wrote about what the numbers couldn't show, the cries of pain he had heard, the deaths he had witnessed, the loneliness of reflection on home and family during the quiet moments between missions. He didn't seek the Medal of Honor. He sought the wounded. Michael Novosel died on April 2, 2006, at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. He was 83 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. In April 2023, Fort Rucker, Alabama, was renamed Fort Novosel in his honor. There are certain things we can verify about October 2, 1969. We know Novosel flew without air cover or fire support into a heavily fortified enemy position. We know enemy fire forced him away 6 times. We know he came back each time from a different direction. We know he performed 15 separate extractions under continuous fire. We know he was wounded on the final one and momentarily lost control of his aircraft. We know he recovered and flew to safety. We know 29 men survived because of what he did that day. What we don't know is what it costs to circle back for the 7th time when 6 attempts have already failed. The official record doesn't tell us what it feels like to hover a helicopter backward toward an enemy bunker. It just tells us he did it. And sometimes that's enough. Michael Novosel flew B-29s over the Pacific at 22. He gave up his rank to start over as a warrant officer at 41. He flew into 3,300 medevac missions across 2 wars. He pulled his own son out of a downed helicopter. His son pulled him out the following week. The Army told him he was too old. He found another way in. 44 years of service. 44 years of finding another way in. The Medal of Honor citation calls what he did on October 2, 1969, an act of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty. Those words are accurate. But they don't capture the man who was a quarter-inch too short to become a pilot and became one anyway. They don't capture what it means to spend 44 years choosing to go back. The numbers, 2,543 missions, 5,589 evacuees, 12,400 flight hours, are the official record. But Novosel himself said those numbers could never show how much misery he had seen, how many cries of pain he had heard, how many deaths he had witnessed. He wasn't counting missions. He was counting people. Michael Joseph Novosel received the Medal of Honor on June 15, 1971. He was born September 3, 1922, in Etna, Pennsylvania. He died April 2, 2006, in Washington, D.C. He was 83 years old. He flew into the worst places men could be, without weapons, without cover, without any reason to go back after the 6th time, other than the fact that there were still men on the ground. That was reason enough. Next time on Above and Beyond, November 1967, Vietnam. A rifle platoon walks into an ambush. Their lieutenant is hit in the first seconds of the fight. He keeps leading. He is hit again. He keeps leading. He throws himself on a grenade to save his men. He survives. His name was Robert Howard. 5 separate actions across 2 years in Vietnam. The most decorated soldier of the entire Vietnam War. That story. Next episode. These names are more than records. They are reminders of what it means to go above and beyond. To help us preserve these stories for the next generation, subscribe to the archive now. To see another story of impossible courage, click the video on your screen. Every citation is a life. Every life is a story. Thank you for honoring them with us.